Welcome to Massive Passive Cash Flow, the podcast that guides professionals to financial prosperity. Join our community and let's start building your wealth. Here's your host, Gary Wilson.
Hello, and welcome back to the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. I'm Gary Wilson, your host, and we're glad to have you back. If you haven't done so, if you could please subscribe to the podcast. It's on a lot of channels, iHeart, iTunes, Radio, Stitcher, you name it. And while you're out there, go visit the globalinvestoragent.com website. These are the agents that we train to work with us investors. They're not your traditional agent. These are way different. They have access to every property in the entire country. I don't mean just like the property address. They can tell you 17 different things about each property and the owners. So instead of you trying to do all that hard work, let them do the work for you, and they get paid by those folks. You don't have to pay for it. And if you're an agent, you definitely need to take this seriously, guys. The market is absolutely starting to change. The writing's on the wall. You need to make this part of your business so that you not just survive, but thrive during this correction we're going into. So in any case, enough of that. We got a great guest today, Steffany Boldrini. And so Steph, first of all, thank you very much for joining us. I know you're extremely busy, and I know how lucky we are to have you on board.
Thank you so much for having me. So nice to meet you.
Yep, you bet. Hey, a great subject today. I know you've done a lot of investing, and you used to help be an angel investor for startup companies, and you started looking at real estate, and this real estate course is very attractive because it's a tangible asset that also produces income, which is pretty neat. So if you could, would you mind telling us how you actually got into that, like a little bit of background, kind of paint the Steffany Boldrini painting for us?
Absolutely. So, I was in tech sales, and at some point you start looking at making some investments, and the easy thing to do was invest as an angel investor in startups. And very quickly, at the time, I was dating somebody who was a successful real estate investor. And very, very quickly, I realized that real estate is a much better, safer, easier form of investing than as an angel investor. And I'm not talking about venture capitalists, specifically angel investors who are the very first people to invest in tech startups that are unproven. Mm-hmm. So that's why I decided to learn everything that I could from him at the time. And here we are today.
Nice. Well, I'll tell you what, let's since you mentioned it, why is commercial real estate such a good investment? Like you talked about, you switched over because it was better, but what is it? What are some of the characteristics, or maybe the top 3 things, if you could, or top 5 things,
Well, the number one thing I think is the ability to leverage your money. So with 100K, you can buy 100K worth of stocks, but with 100K in real estate, you can buy 500K worth of real estate. So let's say the stocks go up 10% and the real estate goes up 10%. Easy math. You just made 10K for your stocks and $50,000 for your real estate. So that's the number one thing that people should be really thinking about. Number 2, the risks compared to angel investing, at least, are much, much smaller. I think I invested in 5 or 6 startups, and 3 of them are already dead. And also, when the venture capitalists come in, they set their own terms, which can hurt the angel investor who was the very first person to believe in the company, took the highest amount of risk. And we we can get overlooked once the VCs come in. And also, you need to invest the same percentage that you initially invested in order for you to keep that percentage based on the new valuation. Okay. So it's very difficult. Even if you hit a home run, you might not make as much money as you think you would.
Yeah, it's all about the leverage. And I know, just like commercial banks and big institutional lenders, they love real estate because it's such a if you look at the upside potential versus downside risk, when you have that physical, tangible asset, even if it's rented and the renter goes away and the owner walks away and you're left with this property, at least you still got the property to sell, right? And get your money back, your investment back with with a business, when a business goes out of business, that's 100% done. There's nothing that you might have
Exactly.
some inventory laying around or something, but and when the leverage is also good for us because, like you said, if you spend 100,000 in stocks and you made 10%, you made $10,000. But if you have 100,000 that you invested in real estate because of leverage, you borrow 80%. So you now buy a $500,000 property. Well, that 10% return is on the entire investment, the 500,000, not just what you put into it. That's a giant difference. So
Huge,
yeah,
huge.
and you
Five
got
times as much.
yeah, and you got tax breaks. You got depreciation if you want to do that.
Yeah.
The property goes up in value over time. You get
Rents go
equity.
up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep, rents go up. So
That's
those are,
beautiful.
it is. And the other thing too is I've heard, and I'm not opposed to the stock market. I've had money in the stock market too. But the thing is people who just want to do the stock market will usually say, well, real estate is not very liquid. I can't get my money out right away. And I respectfully disagree. I can, because of my credit and because of the background, I can go and get a line of credit against the business of property, just like again against a business. It's a business loan and borrow against the equity I've got. Or I can do what's even better. Just have an outstanding line of credit, a business line of credit across the portfolio. So it continues
Yeah.
to grow as I add more properties and I can react quickly. If I find a new property I want, and I know it's going to be a hot one or competition, I'll just stroke a check right there on the spot. So in any case, for people listening, just know once you study the business, there's a lot of flexibility there. There's a lot of potential there, a lot of other things. So let's kind of switch sides here and talk about the downside risk. What are some of the top mistakes to avoid when you're investing in real estate, particularly commercial?
Yes. So with regards to mistakes, I think the number one thing, especially for beginners, is just trying to do everything yourself. The number one thing I recommend people doing is going to an asset class specific industry. So if you want to invest in multifamily, go to a multifamily conference. Start to meet as many people as you can possibly meet in the field, so that when you find a property, well, first you'll learn how to analyze the property, and then when you find one, you have a whole network of people that you can go to make sure that you haven't forgotten anything, or what else should you be asking for to the broker with regards to documents and information. So that would be the number one thing that I recommend people doing. Obviously, markets are super important, right? It cannot be a market that is going downhill, that there is a population decrease, or that is highly focused on one industry, like Detroit, for example. So it has to have a variety of industries that are supporting that market. And also another thing that is important to look at is poverty rate. So is it a high poverty rate or not? So market is very, very important.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that, especially the first one about don't feel like and don't try to do everything yourself, which is what I did when I first started because I'm Mr. Frugal. I wanted to save more money, do it myself. And what I found out, and guys, you'll hear this, everybody listening, you're going to hear this from a lot of people. But what it really means is this is, I'm a perfect example. I would try to go in and do like trim work, for example, because I liked working with my hands, I like working with wood. But the thing is, it would take hours and hours to trim out a room. In the meantime, I've got maybe a neighborhood party going on back home or my kids' ball games or something like that I'm missing because of that. And not only that, I could pay somebody to do a better job than me who has all the tools, right? And they do it every single day. That's their lane they're in. My lane is investing. So my time was much better spent finding and landing the deals. And I finally, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm sitting there, like a lot of people, I'm maxed out. I can't do any more. And I'm not a good, father. I'm not a good investor. I'm good because I'm working too darn hard at trying to do everything. When I finally let go and turned over property management, I did it one step at a time. It freed up so much time and so many headaches went away. And the stress went away. And actually the property manager, was better at it than I was, so I actually made more money, you know?
I bet.
Yeah. So since we touched on it, what would you say are some of the major problems and how do you deal with them in real estate investing? What are some of the major, I'll just kind of mention one, um, but is it a mindset thing, or how do you deal with these major problems and not stress yourself out and end up on medication? You know? Yeah.
Oh, I took Landmark Forum class maybe 4 years ago,
Mhm.
and it changed my life. The one of the things that of the many things you learn there is that a problem is not a problem, is a situation. And
Okay.
so you just say, okay, this is the situation I have to deal with today. For example, when I purchased my first portfolio of properties, one of the roofs caved within 9 days of closing.
Oh boy.
And, what could have been a crazy, stressful, and I don't want to do this thing today day was, okay, let's take action on what do I need to do. First thing is contact the insurance company. And second thing is find a vendor to take the roof out. Third thing is find somebody to build it back up. So that's how I approached it that day, and it was very memorable because of what I've learned at Landmark, which is a phenomenal course. I think the whole world should take it.
So it's called Landmark Forum.
Hmm.
Wow. And is it something you can do online, or but I don't mind promoting them, but it sounds like you're a big fan of them. It's how does that work, or how do you engage with them?
Yeah, now they're doing online, and I heard it's great. And I did take Tony Robbins before, but Landmark is the one that stuck with me for life. Tony Robbins was great for 2 weeks,
Yeah,
and then I forgot everything.
yeah.
So I love Landmark more.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you saying that, by the way. Well, I want to kind of go into more of the path. So, um, I understand you're in California now, we'll encourage you to move to Florida. That's funny because, well, I won't not going to get too political here, but there were the Newsom, the California governor, just had a commercial recently about, hey, Florida, move to California before you lose your freedom of Florida, which is ironic because anybody who's traveled knows you've got far more restrictions in California than any other state, and far more freedoms in Florida. But in any case, a lot of investors do end up moving to Florida, including me, and because there's no state income tax in Florida, at the personal level, whereas in California, last I heard they want to raise it to 18% now, personal income tax. I'm like, that is insane, you know. So I know when I go to California, everything costs more. I mean, I love California. Don't get me wrong. If you're in California listening, I love California. But I gotta tell you, man, it is expensive living out there. Everything, gas, food, housing. You know, you gotta have a permit to have a backyard fire. When I first heard, I was like, "Are you kidding me?" And I said, "No, I got a ticket because I had a little campfire in my backyard." I understand about the forest fires and all that, but he wasn't anywhere near that stuff. You know. So, in any case, so move to Florida, Steph, and we'll life will be easier.
Oh,
um,
I love Florida. I'll be there soon, hopefully.
Yeah. Now, the reason I mention this is more than just, having fun here, but when it comes to geography, we have a couple websites we share with people, and you can take these for your own too. One of them is called the U-Haul report, and it's literally a report from the U-Haul company where
Yeah.
people rent, and you can see where people are moving from and moving to. And there's another one called How Money Walks, and it uses IRS tax filings. They don't provide any personal information, but they can show the movement of money, not necessarily people, but money from state to state. And of course, money's leaving California in droves. I mean, just bucket loads.
Good.
And yeah,
It's
going to
time.
places. Yeah. So we have those reports, but what in your own experience? I mean, do you invest anywhere in the U.S.? Do you have favorite places you like in the U.S. or even abroad? If you could touch on that a little bit, that would be great if you don't mind.
Sure. And it's not to say that people don't make money in real estate in California. So
Mhm.
I know several people that are very successful and they just invest in California. It's a little bit more difficult to get things done, but the people that choose to go through,
Mhm.
the hoops, there is a lot of successful people here. I love the states that are business friendly, that understands that it takes entrepreneurs also to create an economy, and they're not hurting entrepreneurs, and they're encouraging people to be entrepreneurs through however method, making it easy for them to invest, or not having state income tax, for example. So I love Florida and Texas.
Yeah.
Those are my two favorites right now. And there are other states that I'm potentially looking at properties, but those are the top two.
Yeah. And by the way, I want to thank you for mentioning the fact that you can make money in California. I've taught hundreds of classes out there all over the state, and there's great little towns, well, Bakersfield's not that little anymore, but Palmdale, for example. Um, there's San Pedro, which is kind of near Long Beach in south of LA. Just a quiet little place that nobody hears about or talks about or thinks about, but it's been a great place to invest in. Central Valley, Temecula, which is south, kind of southeast of LA, and sort of between LA and Palm Springs, places like that people hardly ever hear of, that are excellent places to invest in. So what I would encourage you to do if you're listening is, use the websites we mentioned, do your homework, and meet, by the way, and reach out to people like Steph, who obviously know what they're doing, and find out where they're investing. And nowadays, guys, I'm telling you, just in the last 20 years, it's become so much easier to invest across state lines and have properties in locations you've never even been to before, because of the availability of information and technology,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I have a couple of short-term rentals that I have never seen live.
Yeah.
So it's definitely possible.
Yeah. I know in the beginning, Steph, I couldn't, my mindset was too conservative. I had to see the property, I had to go buy the property, all this stuff. It wasn't until later I realized, you know what? There's no reason why anybody can't invest anywhere. And our team, what we call the Global Investor Agent team, we've got agents in half the states. So I've got feet on the ground. I mean, any client that uses those agents have feet on the ground there that they can rely on, because they know what they're doing. They have the contacts,
Exactly.
plumbers, electricians, property managers, insurance, lending. The list goes on and on.
All of it. All of it. Yeah, you're completely right.
Yep. Hey, I got to ask you this too, because I know it's such a sensitive subject right now. Is, obviously the economy's changing, inflation is raging, interest rates, the Fed's raised his rates twice now in the last 2 months. Anybody who's been around long enough knows, you know what, I've seen this movie before, and has all the right ingredients. And people who say don't worry, I think, are not being forthright with the general public. I say, you know what, you take it at face value and you prepare. Maybe it won't be so bad, but if you prepare, you're still okay. But if you don't prepare, and it turns out being bad, then you're in bad shape. But back with timing, do you have different strategies you use in a down market than you do in an up market, or is it still the same formula? You're just more selective in an up market, or how does timing affect your approach to this, to investing?
I personally think it's going to be a phenomenal time to buy real estate, starting now, and it's going to get better as interest rates go up. I don't know if you have done the calculations, but I recently did the calculations of, let's say, a 300K NOI property at a 5% cap was $6 million in January 2022. Now with the rates that are higher, let's say 5.75, 6.5, the cap rates are going up. So now that property is selling probably, let's say, a 6% cap. That's $1 million discount that you're getting. Yeah. And sure, let's not forget the fact that you're paying more in interest every year. But if you do the calculations for this example, you're paying 35K more or less every single year, in higher in interest rates that are more 35K more than what you would have paid.
Okay.
Now, rates are going to go down 5 years from now. We're all 99% sure. History tells us. And you just paid, if you times this 35K times 5, let's round it to 30, you are paying $150,000 to get a $1 million discount.
Okay.
And the higher the cap rate goes, the higher the discount you're getting.
Okay.
And also, let's not forget about your down payment is going to be less. You can use that extra money that you're not using for a down payment to buy another property at a higher cap rate.
Yeah.
I think, unless I'm completely missing something, I have a blind spot on this theory, I think high interest rates are going to be awesome for us investors, especially the ones that have been learning a lot over the last few years and not finding a lot of deals. Now is the time for you to shine.
Hi, I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you for participating in the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. Also wanted to let you know that the book Global Investor Agent is officially out in print and in Kindle on Amazon. You can get it by clicking on the link right here. If you are an agent, definitely grab yourself a copy. This book, guys, was not just written by me. I also included 8 other investor agents from around the country. And I didn't just handpick them. I literally opened it up to the entire audience, and it was first come, first serve. So you're going to get feedback from brand new agents all the way up to top 25 team leaders, some on my team, some are not on my team, with valuable insight and instructions and guidance and actual checklist to follow to not just survive, but thrive in this market. I know you're looking for that advantage, and this is it. By the way, if you are an investor, grab a copy for your agent. And for everybody, all profits from the sale of the book, Kindle and print, all go to the Healing House Foundation, 100%. Thank you for doing that too, guys. Let's get back to the show.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting. This will be my 5th market cycle I'm going through. The first 3, I was just so green. I really didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I was taking action and having results, and sometimes I was lucky, sometimes I was unlucky. And then the last recession hit, I just happened to be literally the right place at the right time with the right model. And it wasn't like I planned it. I kind of knew what was happening, but I just was preparing in such a way that I would be hedged against inflation and hedged against the market downturn, a loss of jobs, and all these things that happened, because I had a lot of properties and I had a brokerage company at the time that did work with investors. And so our business, we grew 6-fold in the last recession. The brokerage business did, because we already had investor relationships, and half the agents in the brokerage business left the business because they didn't know how to work with investors. They didn't have the relationships, and they, like a lot of people, they wait until the last minute, or they're in reaction mode. They react to the market as opposed to preparing for the market. And that was the big difference the last time, Steph, is part of it was luck, but part of it was I knew having real estate was the way to go, and I was well prepared for it. And I had a lot of agents who worked with investors back then. I mean, we have even more now because we're across the country, but that was the difference maker. It was the investing and it was the investors that really made the difference. And we thrived. We didn't just survive. In fact, we were so busy, it was almost insane trying to keep up with everything. But we did several thousand transactions in those few short years. It was more than any other time. It was crazy, So it just goes to show you, for everybody listening, the market could go up, the market could go down. And just know this, it absolutely is. When people ask me, you think we're going to have a recession? I'm like, 100% absolutely certain. I'd bet $1 million I'd bet $1 billion we're going to have a recession. I just can't tell you exactly when, and I can't tell you how big or deep or wide or long it's going to be, but I can tell you it's going to happen. So why panic? Don't panic. Just prepare for it,
Yeah.
Sorry, I feel like I was preaching there for a moment, but
No, you're completely right. And apparently we are in a recession. They just don't want to admit it.
Yeah, exactly. If you look at the numbers, I always tell people, look at the numbers don't lie. Strip out all the media and all the stuff that goes on and just focus on the numbers. It's supply and demand is a seesaw, right? When demand's up, supply's down. And when you raise prices and raise the cost of borrowing money, demand's going to drop. And when the demand drops, the seesaw turns and then the supply goes up. That's when the investors are like, it's like Christmas time for us,
100%.
Yeah. So I want to ask you, there was a couple things I was reading about you and studying, and you're fascinating, and I love your background. You talk about getting 36% cash on cash returns. And which asset class is it? Is it commercial in general? Is there certain like retail versus industrial or anything specifically that people can sink their teeth into that is more likely to have those kind of returns, you know?
Sure. This one in particular is car wash asset class. Car washes are until now selling at a pretty high cap rate. However, I must warn, it's a lot of work. And again, go to a car wash conference first, learn as much as you can, see if this is really something you want to do, see if this is really something you can manage remotely if you're doing remotely. Because the returns are great, but the headaches are also great.
Yep, the old risk reward formula.
Yeah.
Well, that's right. That's what cap rate is actually. I mean, if you study what cap rate means, what it means is the higher the return, generally the greater the risk. So in this case, risk shows up in the way of headaches and gray hair, you know? So
Exactly.
yeah. Yeah, I always thought about that car washes. I'm thinking, man, it looks pretty awesome. Cars are driving through all day long. But if you
Yeah.
imagine all those mechanics that are in place there, the plumbing, the mechanics, the soap, so many moving parts, I mean, literally moving parts, it has got to be a pretty high maintenance demand on that, you know? So, but by the
And
way,
employees also.
well, yeah, that's right. Yeah. Um, okay, so let me ask you this. You mentioned going to conferences. How important is it to build a real estate network around yourself? And for somebody starting, you know, how do you do that? How do you actually get started? Actually, two-part question. How can you start to build a real estate network? And how do you actually get started in this crazy business of investing in real estate? You know?
Yes. So after my then boyfriend and I broke up, I said, oh, shoot, who's going to be my mentor now? So I decided to join Real Estate Guys Summit at Sea that year. And it is a little more costly, but the quality of people that you're going to get in these higher cost events are much higher.
Okay.
And obviously, the way that I think is ROI always. How are you going to learn something that is going to pay for this event? And I think in almost every single event that you go to, you're going to learn something that will pay tenfold, if not more, or build a connection that will pay tenfold, if not more, than the price of going to that event. That's how I always think about it. And it's not just going, it's following up. It's building a relationship with these people and it's checking in with them. It's when you go to their wherever they live to connect with them and go for dinner or coffee. So it's not just a one and done type of thing, but definitely recommend. I think I met almost all 200 people that went, and I started a spreadsheet that now has over the 500 people after going to different events. And I tag each person by what asset class, where do they live. So whenever I have a question in any topic, I can reach out to anybody. And yeah, it's definitely important if you don't have a very successful mentor next to you.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I know early on, I didn't even know there were conferences available. You know, I took Carlton Sheets investing program a long time ago, and I thought, well, this is all we have. They didn't teach it in high school. They didn't teach it in college. You got to learn on your own. I learned from this guy on TV named Carlton Sheets. But it was a great start though, but it wasn't until later where I realized there are groups, there are conferences, and so RIA is the big, Real Estate Investors of America is the big real estate organization around the country. Years ago, it was one called ACRE, American Congress of Real Estate, and I was part of them, part of RIA. I was a speaker at both. I ended up was a keynote speaker at one of the RIA events several years ago on a cruise ship. That was pretty neat. But just networking with people, everybody, I got to tell you, even you're going to learn from the teachers, from the trainers and the coaches, but just hanging around other investors from different parts of the country, you pick up all these little tidbits that you wouldn't otherwise get. So I know people who are like, they're penny pinchers. They're like, I call myself frugal, but that's different from somebody who's cheap, Don't be cheap,
Agree.
I mean, be smart with your money, but you've got to
Yeah.
invest in yourself and build that network. And there's so many ways to do that. Like you said, there's multifamily networks, multifamily masterminds. I mean, Rod Cleef is one of them. I had him on my podcast a while back. In fact, I'm going to be on his in a couple of weeks, and he's one of the top people in that field. Hey, speaking of multifamily, I just was thinking about some deals I did years ago that involved portfolios, and I noticed that was in some of your writing too. Would you mind touching on? We probably got about 5 minutes to go here, and this probably will take up the rest of the time, but portfolios, I think, are very interesting because you can accumulate a lot of properties in one move, and they might even be diversified in different areas. So, how would you actually go about identifying them, analyzing them, closing them? If you wouldn't mind, kind of walk us through that. That would, if you don't mind sharing, that would be awesome.
I'm sorry, regarding portfolios or multifamily?
Portfolios, yes.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't own multifamily right now. Never owned. Portfolio, it's all about the numbers. If the market makes sense, and you can add value one way or another through either increasing rent or decreasing costs or building more, if there's land that comes with the property. Those are the ways to add value. Adding technology, cutting employees if possible in your asset class, if it comes with an employee. So there are many ways to add value. And yeah, with regards to portfolio, it's really all about the numbers and math, and is there value to be added within at least some of the properties.
Yeah. So a portfolio, like I bought and sold portfolios in the past, and some were single family homes and some were, a conglomerate of, fourplexes and threeplexes and duplexes and things like that. Even a big apartment complexes I had, there were multiple buildings we bought together. I remember that was the challenge was with this, say that let's take a portfolio of single family homes, 20 single family homes. As I'm in my mind, I'm thinking, Steph, I've got to go visit all those properties and I got to go do the inspections and I've got to look at all the numbers. And it all makes sense. But is there a way you go about doing that where you're not actually driving all around and flying all around? Like, do you just look at the numbers and then you rely on somebody there on site to go through and look at the furnace and the key things like that? How do you, like, what's your process for that, if you don't mind,
Yeah, you should definitely hire somebody to do the inspections. That's what I do. I don't do any inspection because I'm not a professional inspector. So I always look for recommendations either from the broker, or I look online and I go by 5-star reviews, and I reach out to the people that have the highest ratings first, and then whoever makes sense. And if I like, it depends the type of work, but if you don't like the first job that they've done, you can go to the next one. And you can also hire people online to do things for you, analyze properties on Upwork or Fiverr. You can hire people on TaskRabbit to do things on site. So there are many ways to not be there and still have a presence there, whether it be through cameras that you can watch from your phone, or the alarm that you can see if it's armed or not, and many other things.
Yeah. There's even software you get on your computer. So if you have people working for you in remote areas, like around the country, around the world, you can actually monitor their usage of their computer and what sites they're on. And it's amazing. So that's a lot easier today than it was even just a few short years ago. So the team that I was referring to earlier, we call the Global Investor Agent Team. It truly is global. I mean, we've got properties we're selling in India and Canada and Mexico, most 90% obviously US. But we have people all over the world. I'm thinking, how do we manage this? But I just want to tell you, it's actually easier today. It's not a big scary thing. Now, granted, you got to remember, somebody in the Philippines or somebody in India, they're sleeping when we're awake and they're awake when we're sleeping. So you have to schedule something maybe 8 in the morning or 8 at night when everybody's either waking up or going to bed, and it works, So,
or you can pay a little bit more and hire the people that are willing to work graveyard shifts.
Yep.
as a couple of my VAs are willing to do. So that's another option too, if you're hiring people overseas.
Yeah. We just started doing that, by the way. I realized, you know what? I don't have to just use email when I'm awake, and then they email me back when they're awake. We start requesting, we want somebody who's, East Coast, Eastern Standard Time, 9 to 6, and they'll do it, but still, $5, $6, $7 an hour is way better than 20 or 30 or 40 an hour, So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, I know we're pretty close here, but Steph, how if someone wanted to reach out with you and maybe partner with you or present a deal to you, what's the best way to reach you? And anything, website, a blog, podcast, I'm happy to share that with people so they have a way to get a hold of you,
Thank you so much, Gary. My website is montecarlorei.com. I'm on all social medias if you search by my name. And I have a podcast in commercial only, no residential, no multifamily, called Commercial Real Estate Investing from A to Z.
Okay. I like that. In fact, maybe I should be a guest on yours, So
Yes, for sure.
I'd love to do that. All right. Well, tell you what, thank you for sharing that, by the way, and thank you for sharing everything. I know I talk fast, so I know people got a lot of content here, but any final parting words of wisdom or suggestions for the listeners?
Have a backup lender whenever you do your first few deals, because that first lender that will approve you might come in last minute and say, oh, we don't feel like lending to you today, or, well, the rates are going to go up because we didn't lock it. So have backup lenders that you are approved with on your first few deals until you know for sure that you're dealing with a professional lender, and maybe for the rest of your career. That is TBD.
Yeah. You know what? That's funny you mentioned that, because I was explaining to somebody the other day, I at one point I had as many as 5 lenders that I went to, and not that I had them compete against each other, but I realized the lending rules, like a loans to one ratio, they can only lend so much money to one person. And even though you're maybe a great credit risk, they can't loan you anymore because of banking restrictions. So excellent idea. Have more than one lender to go to. And so for everybody listening, just remember and write this down if you're not driving, MonteCarloREI.com. Okay. That's the website. And then the podcast is Commercial Real Estate Investing from A to Z. So there you go, a website and a podcast you can tap into. And Steffany, I think I speak for a lot of people when I say thank you for doing this and taking your precious time to do this. And hopefully in the future, I tell you what, I think I'd like to have you back again too. We can maybe take a case study and break it down step by step from identification all the way to closing, and really let people dig in, because you actually do it. And that's so important, because we learn from doing more than we learn from just reading and listening, So
Exactly. And thank you so much for taking time out of your precious day for having me. Thank you.
Glad to do it. For everybody listening, if you could do Steffany and me both a favor, leave a review on, whatever you're listening to, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher. The reviews and podcasts are what makes the world go around. That's our currency. And because we do this, we absorb all the costs, and you don't have to pay for it. So all we ask is leave a review, and it helps Steffany, helps our Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. And while you're there, go to the website, right? MonteCarloREI.com. And when you do that, next step is go to globalinvestoragent.com. And if you're an agent, click on the Learn More button. You just heard us talk about this. This is not a drill. This is real life. The market is changing. You need to take on these investors as part of your model and learn how to do it correctly, so you work with the right kind of investors like Steph. Okay. We'll see you on the next Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. In the meantime, God bless you and your families, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Massive Passive Cash Flow. Be sure to go to realestatewithgarywilson.com to join our community and start building wealth today.